So please welcome to stage Kai, Sasha, and Kimura.
So, hi, my name is Kai Morton, and I'm 16 years old. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so as you can see, I am 16 years old. I am a programmer, a sprinter, an ODOT dragon, a bassist, guitarist, a gamer, and a golfer. And I hope to go to MIT when I go to college. Thank you. So for me, coding has changed my life significantly. After being a shy girl who was afraid to speak and get out of her comfort zone, I can see that I've changed tremendously into someone who can make a lot of change in her world. So programming acted as a catalyst, a bridge to my understanding, connecting the concepts that I learned in class to something I could see and alter. The algebra concepts that I failed to understand suddenly made sense, and I began to blossom until my friends and peers would come to me for help. So you can see for the 12-year-old Kai to present day, 12-year-old Kai who was just learning to code to present day, that coding empowered her. And it opened the doors to understanding so I could see that I can make an impact on the world around me. Through BGC, I've had the opportunity of a lifetime to travel the world, meet amazing and intelligent people, and speak in front of hundreds. And that's how I know for sure that coding and technology has changed my life. And now I'll pass it off to Sasha with her story.
Hi everyone, my name is Sasha Williams. I'm 14 years old and I'm in 8th grade and I go to St. Isidore School. I'm first gonna tell you a little bit about myself and then I'm gonna go on to quick steps on creating awesome and amazing apps. So, ever since I was young, I've had many passions in my life, from cheerleading, volleyball, dance, singing, drawing, acting, and computer design. Like so much. But one of my main passions in life is performing arts. I love singing, acting, and dancing in front of huge crowds, just like this one. But then I have all my other passions calling me too. So I found a quote one day. It said, create your own opportunities because if you can dream it, you can achieve it. And I believe in that so much. And that's exactly what I told my mom when she was talking to me about my plan A and plan B for life in college. I'm like, well, Mom, why can't I have it all? Why can't I have my love for performing arts and my love for technology as well, all wrapped up into one? And that's what my plan is to do. My plan is to be an entrepreneur when I grow up. And that's how technology has changed my life. It has taught me that I can use all my passions in new and exciting ways. And I cannot wait to see what technology and Black Girls Code has in store for me. Next slide, please. So now I'm gonna teach you how to create an awesome app, but in quick way, okay? So first, what is an app? An app is a self-contained program designed to fulfill a purpose, usually downloaded on a mobile device. So when you open up your Android or iPhone, that's an app. That little colorful square, that's an app, by the way, okay? Parents. So, to create an app, you use an application software. An application software is to set one or more programs designed for a permanent perform of functions, tasks, and activities. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, where can I find an application software? A couple examples are by Balsamiq, Appery, and App Inventor. Balsamiq, you can first have a visual mock-up of exactly what you want on your app. Then you can go to Appery.io and design the exact same design that you put on Balsamiq, but you can download it to your phone so you can see how it will look with real buttons. Then after that, you can go to App Inventor and finally code your app. But we're not gonna go in coding right now because, well, quick. So next slide, please. But before you go into the application software and you do all that, you have to first come up with your ideas. Number one, strategy. Think different. Step outside of the box. Come up with a creative idea for your app. But when you're coming up with the idea, make sure it involves the community as well so you know how you can help it. But also, go into the Apple store so you know you don't steal the same idea from someone else. You want to make sure you come up with your own original idea. Step 2, design and development. Make your prototype, then product, so you can make sure you're fixing all the mistakes you make in your prototype to final product. Also, come up with a good name for your app too, so you can interest your consumer, because then it's like, what's the point? After that, you have to finally send it out there into the world. Step 3, send it out there. And then after you do that, make sure you put feedback on your app so you know the mistakes you can make, so you know the mistakes that you made, and also you can fix them and send them in your later updates. And that's how you create an awesome app. Now to Kimora.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Kimora, and today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about myself. So I'm 12 years old and I go to East Bay Innovation Academy. My motto is, you can do whatever you want as long as you put your mind to it. And that picture right there, I put that there because I think that it represents the way that I think. And the college sign is because I plan to go to college. Well, Stanford is where I plan to go. My 3 main passions are dance, art, and coding. And I love dance and art because you can express your emotions in so many different ways when you're doing either of them. And I love coding with Black Girls Code and Kimberly because it's fun and it's exciting and it's really challenging. So I think that's it. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so it's me again, so I'm going to teach you a little bit about HTML. So what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which is a set of codes used to create a web page. Okay, now next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, so here's some tips and tricks on HTML. So the first tip is that if you want to bold your text, you have to put a B in between the less than and greater than sign before the text that you want to bold. And then you have to do the same after the text that you want to bold, but this time with the backslash. And the backslash indicates that you want to end your code. You have to use the less than and greater than signs for all the other types of tips and tricks that you see on the slide. Like if you want to italicize your text, you put an I in between the less than and greater than signs. And if you want to underline your text, you put a U. But for font color, it's a little bit different. If you want to change your font color, you have to put font color equals red. And then to end it, you'll put backslash font. And if you want to center your code, you have to put the word center in between the less than and the greater than sign. So now you probably want to go build your app on Mozilla Thimble right here. So, and of course, you want to build an amazing one, right? So, and you're going to want people to refer to it. So you should put a link that's going to your awesome website. So you have to use href, which stands for a hypertext reference, and then you're going to put your internet URL, and then in the green, you're going to put the name of your web page, and then you end that with \A. Thank you. It's been fun teaching. Go code.
Next slide, please. Okay, so thank you so much for listening to us. And right now, I'd like to welcome to the stage my mother, Kimberly Bryant, the founder of Black Girls Code, and Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Academy.
I felt a little left out of that hug.
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry.
Feedback for next time.
It wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
A little bit, maybe. But.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, well, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, let's just start with the basics. What is Black Girls Code?
So, I always like to say that Black Girls Code is a movement. But it's more than just a movement to teach kids how to code. In its essence, that is what we do. But it really is, like you saw with the students that were on the stage, about teaching girls self-confidence, teaching them self-efficacy, and giving them these skills and then sending them off into the world, as change agents and really as, I guess, our best examples of the potential for girls in our community. But from the purest sense, we are focused on training up the next generation of technology leaders and creators, and doing that by engaging these girls in classes in computer science, robotics, web design, game design, and really making them, have a chance for the first time to put their voice into the design.
And even as you mentioned, it's you almost view it more as a movement than just an organization, and it even kind of stems from the name. I mean, it's not Black Girls Who Code, which is how kind of a more traditional name. What was kind of the thought behind the naming?
Well, it really stemmed on literally traditionally the page of all the names that it could possibly be. And so 2011, I was looking, really tooling this idea around in my head about this organization that would teach girls of color to code. And I literally wrote all the ones down. I was like, Kaleidoscope Girls, how does this sound? Hey, Girls of Color Code, how does this sound? But I ended up writing on the paper one day, Black Girls Code. And honestly, when I wrote it, it was a bit shocking even to me, and I'm a Black woman. And I remember I sat on that for a long time because I was like, this may be too radical. How will people accept this? And I remember, and I was talking to Lisa Stone in a reception, that I was at one of the sessions at her very first blog, her BET, seminars that she was having for entrepreneurs. And I was listening to one of the speakers, who was actually another sister of Filipino descent. And I went up to her after with this paper, and I was like, I want to do this organization. And I want to call it Black Girls Code. And what do you think about that? And this was Annalisa, who is the founder of Global Fund for Women. And she said, I love it. She's like, I want you to pull out your phone right now. We're going to save all these names. We're going to get all the websites. I think it's fantastic because I connect with this name because I am a Black girl too. And I think at that moment was the validation I needed, was to say that, yes, we are making a bold statement with this name of Black Girls Code, and it's okay. It represents something beyond just African American girls, because it really is, I think, putting Blackness as a concept that can really transcend multiple cultures. And it's also, like we talked about before, very declarative. So I didn't want to say Black girls maybe can code, Black girls may like coding. It was really specific that I wanted to say, this is something that girls of color do. This is something that girls of color can do well. And that's why it became Black Girls Code.
And even I sometimes maybe overly read into this, but the code is in caps.
Yes.
Even when you write it down when you're typing,
Right.
it's capital CODE.
Yes. And I think the way we ended up putting code in caps was because we would often, when we first started out, have people ask us, oh, Black Girls Code, what is the code? Can you tell me what the code is?
Oh, they thought like Black Girls Code,
Right, this
like a
was a
secret
secret
language.
code, like
I
this
see,
was
like a
like the
possessive.
secret,
Oh, that's
exactly.
fascinating.
And I was like, no, that's not what we mean. Although that could be.
Yeah, that's
at any
another
given day.
organization
now,
right
you
there,
may
yeah.
not, it
Yeah.
just depends. But, we really wanted it to be, clear that we were talking about coding and technology. And I thought that by changing it and putting it in all caps, we would emphasize that we're doing coding in the pure sense of the word.
And so how did you, the stories of how any founder of any organization, but especially I think a not-for-profit which has a social mission, how it gets started is always interesting. What was the immediate catalyst that got you to start Black Girls Code? And then maybe we'll talk about kind of the broader background.
Sure. So, at the end of 2010, I was, at a turning point in my career. So I had moved out to the Bay Area years before to work at a large biotech company and spent many, many years in corporate America and was ready to get the heck out of there. I was like, oh, no, I can't do this anymore. And I had my opportunity when our company got purchased, and I was able to take a package and move away from the company and really wanted to do something on my own. but not create a nonprofit. That's not my idea of fun
That'd be lame.
at that time. But I wanted to start a business, and I know I wanted to jump into this tech thing because I was like, oh no, I want to get into this tech thing. You know, Twitter was just starting to take off. And I started to talk to lots of people, trying to figure out what I wanted to do in tech. Right about that same time, my daughter Kai, who was on the stage before, was about to start middle school. Now, because her mom is an engineer, I think it's, you know, just obvious that she would spend a lot of time around technology and computers. But I mean, this kid was like wed to the computer like her Siamese twin. Like literally, she stayed on the computer all the time, and it drove me crazy. She was heavily like into gaming, so like even offline games, you know, like World of Warcraft, all kinds of crazy stuff. That wasn't me as a kid, so I just did not understand why you would spend all your time and waking hours playing a game, but she did. But right about that time, she was just old enough where I could send her to summer camp. And I did. I found this fantastic summer camp to teach her computer science. It was at Stanford. She went there for the summer, and it was a life-changing experience for her. So before that, you know, and I was like, why do you spend all this time on these games? She was like, I just want to be a game tester and get all the new games the first time they come out. And I was like, oh my God, this is a waste of my money. But I mean, she was seriously, this is like a passion. So I was like, well, you know, you can build these things. Why don't you build this? But she didn't. That didn't make sense to her as a concept. But after she went to that summer camp,
And how old was she when she went to this camp?
She was 12.
Okay.
She was 12. And after she went to the summer camp, you know, it did two things. First of all, she decided she wanted to attend Stanford. Now, that's another story all in.
It seems like she got.
Yeah.
It seems like her judgment improved since then.
Yeah,
'Cause
maybe.
now
I'm hoping, depending on who. Oh, Stanford, that's Sal, that's not me.
I'm going to talk to Kimora.
But it really did change her whole perspective in terms of life goals. But it also really changed her perspective of what she could achieve with technology. And that was fantastic. So I went and picked her up. She bounded down the stairs, and she's smiling. She had a great time. And when we were driving home back into the city, I was like, well, how did things go? And she said, they went well, but, you know, sometimes the guys, the instructors and TAs, they didn't really pay much attention to the girls in the classroom. And I reflected on when they were doing the presentations, when the parents were all there at the end, I probably saw like 2 girls, maybe 5, it wasn't that many. And there were no other students of color in the classroom. And my heart sunk a little bit because I knew at that age of being in a middle school, you know, it's really very, very sensitive age for girls, especially for girls. And I did not want her to lose that light, you know, when you see that light in your kid's eyes, I didn't want her to lose that. And so when I left, I was like, I am going to take my money out of my 401k and send 10 girls to this camp next summer. And that's really all I wanted to do. And I started to talk to folks about it. And they're like, well, yeah, that would be great, but, you know, why don't you just create it yourself? Why don't you create a camp? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I've been telling you, I really did not want to start a nonprofit. I just did not want to do it. But as I started to talk to people and really, you know, kind of tool this idea around in my head, I just realized that even if I send 10 girls next year, that may not be enough. Because I knew there were other girls that looked like my daughter, had certain interests like my daughter, that still would be left out. And I wanted to do something about that. And so that was the very first spark of the idea of doing something. I didn't really know what it may look like at that time, but doing something and building something that would specifically support girls like Kai.
And you know, when your daughter tells you that story, that maybe she wasn't getting the attention, and that that there was very few people that she could directly relate to, or you observed this. I mean, to some degree, it might have not been a surprise to you because you are an engineer yourself.
Absolutely.
And you know, when you were going through school, I mean, what was did you have similar experiences?
I did, and I think that's the thing that hit me the most. That's the thing that like crushed my soul to the core, and I'm just telling you, like, seriously, that was because I remember, because I, you know, grew up as a young woman of color going to school to get my engineering degree in a very similar environment that looked very similar to that classroom that she was in that summer. And I knew without a doubt how difficult it would be. So, you know, growing up, she went, like most kids, through all the different phases of she wanted to be a veterinarian, then she wanted to be an artist, then she wanted to be maybe something else like a doctor. Then, it just was like all these different things. So I never really thought that she might follow in my footsteps. I really never thought that this kid would be becoming an engineer until that day. And knowing like all the things that I went through, like through my career and even before that, you know, as a student, one of the very few women of color in my engineering class at Vanderbilt, I knew the road ahead was going to be very difficult. And I was concerned, like seriously concerned, because I think it takes a lot for any woman to make it through these heavily male-dominated environments and to make it out with your sanity. I mean, you know, it is what it is. It's just a very interesting, you know, it's a very interesting path. Yeah.
So I have like 100 questions now. So this is, and I mean, I think this is starting to get really to the core of the issue is that, you know, when you were growing up, first, when did you first feel the spark of that you might want to be an engineer or get into computers? When did that happen for you?
Well, here's the thing. I grew up the middle child in my family, the crazy middle child. That really, really is me. And but I had an older brother who was like my role model. He was like the person I followed around. I went everywhere with. I wanted to do what he did. He was really the computer geek in our family. That wasn't me. So I always say that.
How much older was he?
2 years older.
2 years older. Okay, so.
And you know, I always say that. In my family, with my daughter and I'm more of a nerd. So I'm like the kid that reads all the books and checks out all the books from the library, as opposed to really being all into technology.
As opposed to the cool thing like programming.
Oh, yeah, the fruits, yeah. I don't know about that. But I was the kid in the books. And I really thought that I was going to be a lawyer growing up. That still would like to be a lawyer, but you know, in a few years. But I was never really the techie type. But I like science and I like math. So what happened was that because I was such a good student in math and science, the guidance counselors really directed me, like, maybe you might want to look at this engineering thing. But I didn't know what that was, you know, because I grew up in the inner city of Memphis, Tennessee. I mean, like the deep inner city of Memphis. So that I did not see anyone that was doing anything. Nobody owned a computer in my neighborhood. Nobody was doing anything with computer science. We were like the outlier kids in our clique. So we were the smart, nerdy kids that got sent to optional school programs because they were smart and they were good at their books, when all of our friends, not so much. And so it just was not something that I had aspired to because I didn't even know what it was. But it was because of those guidance counselors really saying, this is something that you might want to think about, that led me to decide to apply to these schools, get accepted, and then find myself in this very first class in engineering at Vanderbilt.
And when you show up at Vanderbilt, you know, it sounds like you've had these great mentors to encourage you to get here. Mm-hmm. But what was that like? I mean, you kind of alluded a little bit to it. What was your first reaction, especially when you start showing up in some of these classes?
Culture shock. Coming from the inner city of Memphis, ending up on the campus of the Harvard of the South, totally culture shock for me. It was like unreal. It was like landing on Mars and trying to figure out my way. So, you know, when you're a smart kid, and even if you're in a good school and you're surrounded by folks that look like you, that's a lot different than when you're placed in a classroom with no one that looks like you and no one that's really interested in even telling you like what you need to do.
So there's this first order of culture shock of just Vanderbilt is just very different than where you grew up. Mm-hmm. But then there's the second order of culture shock, which is kind of what we're here to talk about, which is, right. You know, not only were you at Vanderbilt, but you decided to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And so what were those first engineering, and you know, this is, once again, it's kind of socioeconomically different, but also in the engineering programs, it's also about, it's male dominated as well.
Well, interestingly enough, when I landed at Vanderbilt, I wasn't my degree is in electrical engineering, but that wasn't my first decided major. I thought I was going to go into civil engineering when I first got to Vanderbilt, primarily because I always have been a bit of a social activist. Even when I was in school, I was in student government, very involved in community organizations, and I really wanted to do an engineering that was a little bit closer to civics and the people, so to speak. So I thought civil engineering was it. But I had a rude awakening because I remember vividly when I graduated from high school, because I was in an honors program, I had lots of AP classes that I took. So I was able to test out a lot of my first year classes. And I remember being in this, first year civic class with about 100 students, sitting in the class, probably the only student of color, maybe it was another woman, I don't remember. And the professor asked, well, how many of you have, taken an AP class and, you got a 3+ or something on the test? And in this big room, it's like the first week of school, nobody raised their hand. I looked around, and I slowly raised my hand in the middle of this crowd. So me, this little one raisin, and a sea of milk.
Yes, I don't know. I don't know how to complete the metaphor,
Yes.
but yes, that's.
And the interesting thing was that the professor ignored me. Oh, yeah. He ignored me, and he didn't even acknowledge me. And this professor was actually the head of the Civic department. And I didn't really know how to react to that because that wasn't, I come from Memphis, I'm like an honors student, like top honors student, used to being recognized, used to being lauded, used to being encouraged. Totally different experience for me. And this was in my first week of classes. And I think, I stayed in Civic at least for like a couple of weeks until I could get the heck out of there. But it was just a bit of a rude awakening for me as a student, and especially as a woman of color and a student of color, because I recognized without a doubt that this was not Oz, and it was going to take a lot, for me to be able to survive in that environment.
So why do you think the professor did that? Because I'm sure if we, had a conversation with him, he'd probably, say all his values, and they're probably not, at least what he would say would not be so different than maybe what we would say, but something at least subconscious was going on with him, some form of bias. What do you think was going on in his head or not going on in his head?
Well, so I don't know what he might say, but I believe, his bias has told him that it could not be possible that this little black or brown girl who's sitting in this class with, mostly men that are not men of color, could be the only one that had this level of achievement. That just, I don't think it registered in his mind that could be a reality.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't able to even recognize it.
You must be raising your hand for some other reason, not
Yeah.
the question that
Right.
he asked. And I mean, that's week one, and then you at some point you do transfer into electrical engineering, but I can't imagine it being any dramatically different, or was it?
Well, it wasn't necessarily that it was dramatically different, but the thing that was different is that I found a mentor. So I'm walking around campus one day, and I run into this upperclassman, tall sister woman that I just started to talk to. It was like the nicest person I ever met. And she told me she was in electrical engineering. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And tell me more about it. And this person today is like one of my closest friends. But it was because of seeing a young woman of color that I could see myself reflected in, that was doing something that I may be interested in, that made the difference. Because had I not met her, I'm not sure that I would have stayed in the School of Engineering. I'm not even really sure I would have stayed at Vanderbilt. But that kind of speaks to how we feel about mentorship and why mentoring and having the girls to really have these role models is so vitally important. Being able to see yourself reflected in someone that's leading a path that you may in the future, that's like critically important for girls of color. And that was important for me.
And so, you've had these experiences in college, through work. You see your daughter, she goes to the summer camp. It's kind of it reminds you of what, you know, and you're like, wow, maybe it didn't change so much. I mean, given all of that, and given a lot of what I'm sure you've gone through at work and all of these other things, why did you think it's so important? Why not just say, well, why don't you go into another field where it's going to be, you know, an easier path, or where you will find more people like you? Why was it so important to say, well, no, focus on coding, focus on STEM?
Well, it wasn't so much that I wanted her to particularly focus on coding, but that's what her interest was. And so for me as a mom, my goal was really to figure out what it was that she had a love of and figure out how I could support that. It just happened to be that it was technology. So had it been dance, had it been music, you know, maybe it would have been Black Girls Who Drum. I don't know what it would be.
It would be Black Girls Drum.
That Black Girls Drum.
No who in there.
But but it ended up being technology. And so for me, I think it did create, you know, a bit of a stronger bond for us as a mother and daughter, because now, you know, I could see myself in her, and perhaps she could see herself in me.
You start Black Girls Code. It started a very nascent, hey, maybe we should run some camps or after-school programs. You know, fast forward today, what is it doing? Who are y'all reaching, and where do you see it going?
One of the things I think we found very interesting about Black Girls Code is that we didn't really know what we were doing in the beginning. So I was lucky enough that I stumbled into a Code for America meeting one night. And I had, again, hit the card again. I had these really crude cards that I had really like cut out of some cardboard paper, and I had put Black Girls Code. By then I knew the name at least.
Your cards are dangerous.
Yeah, my cards. That's where
the
the gold is on those cards.
Yeah.
I had these cards, and like literally, seriously, I cut out the cardboard and was taking around in Code for America. And the fellows that year was like, Black Girls Code. They asked me all about this. Like, this is really interesting. We just talked to another guy who wants to do something similar for kids from underrepresented communities. You guys should talk. And my very first connection, who was really a coder, to come onto my core team was one of the Code for America fellows that year. And so with that one resource and just 3 coworkers, we were able to like put together this idea of what we thought the girls would be able to do. And we just really, you know, we're kind of testing it out. So that's kind of always how we run, is like really putting these ideas together and seeing what works. But the interesting is that it took off. So I think we weren't really expecting it necessarily to take off like it did. So it started with the girls, you know, they jumped right in, and they came back every week, and they would outrun our curriculum. So they would do everything that we had planned for that Saturday, and we would have to rush around at the end of the class and figure out something else for them to do. So we were like, oh, they like this coding thing. Okay, we might have something. And then when we went into the second year, we decided to kind of take BGC on the road and go to other cities. We were like, oh, it's pretty good here in the Bay Area. Let's try it in Atlanta. Let's try it in Chicago. And the organization really just started to grow exponentially. And so today, you know, we have kind of morphed into this chapter organization that has chapters across the U.S. We have a chapter in Johannesburg, and a long list, probably like I stopped counting this list, of about 70 or so cities that want a Black Girls Code in their town.
And how does that happen? If I'm in, so when, you know, in Chicago, say, when y'all started, was it a kind of a local entrepreneur?
When we were just trying to figure this thing out, we had our very first grant come from Google. And now, to this day, why they took a chance on us, I don't know, but I'm glad that they did.
Yeah. You seem like a bunch of slackers.
I don't know.
Why they invested
But
in you.
they gave us this little seed grant in the beginning, and that was like the start of that. Just gave us a little bit of inspiration to kind of keep going. Because in the beginning, you know, as I mentioned, I was like, I really literally paid for everything out of my pocket because it just left this biotech company, so we were well paid. Okay. Not like nonprofit, but that was the first grant we had. And from that time, we've been really lucky to have a strong community. So in the beginning, you know, we did lots of crowdfunding, and we were just overwhelmed by how much, as a grassroots organization, our community supported the work that we did. So we did one crowdfunding, and I think that was in 2012, the first one. And we were like, oh, let's try to raise $20,000 because we were running out of money.
It's a good time to raise money.
Yeah, that's a good time. But we didn't really know if we could raise $20,000, but we did. So we raised about $23,000. We came around into 2013, and we were like, you know what? Let's do it again. But let's set this big goal. Let's raise $100,000. Now, we did not necessarily think that we could raise $100,000, but we were willing to try. And, we were just blown away with the fact that we were able to hit that goal. And I think everybody else was surprised we were able to hit that goal, too. But I think it was testament to, this strong community of supporters that we found from industry, and even we get little checks, like $2 checks, like from Canada. I don't know
From
how
Canada?
Canada is like one of our biggest funders. I have no idea how people in Canada know we exist. But they send us money all the time. Thank you, Canada, if you're listening to the live stream. They send us money all the time, and so we've seen the
Bunch of do-gooders up in
yes,
Canada.
yes, I love it. I love Canadians. But we've had that grassroots support, and now over the last couple of years, we've really seen the support from other technology companies and companies that are not necessarily technology-centric to really come into like a lot of the funding of the programs and the expansion.
So I have a fundraising idea for you.
All right.
It's a little bit of a longer term.
Okay.
You should talk to the girls that are attending your program. Non-binding contract. 10% equity of anything that they start.
I'm with that.
Just, I predict in about 15 years,
Yes.
you will be funding other people. You
No,
will have.
that sounds like a pretty good idea for me, but I was
non-binding.
thinking more for like a retirement
Okay,
plan for
yes.
myself as a
Yeah, you should get in and actually let me in on some of this too.
All right.
So, I mean, taking a step back from it all, and you're kind of in the center of this because we're in the middle of, we're in Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
and you're hearing all about, intentional or unintentional bias. There's gender bias, there's racial bias. Where do you think this comes from, and what do you think needs to be done, especially in Silicon Valley? We're at the heart of kind of the coding world here, that could improve things. Look, we all have biases, but then how does that actually move the dial? I mean, is it actually on kind of the grassroots that you kind of prove people wrong? That you and other groups enable enough young women of color to participate that at some point the bias just breaks, or are there other kind of more systemic things that can be done?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes, and we can do more. I think when I think about the pipeline and the pipeline issues, folks are often like, oh, no, it's not just a pipeline, it's not just K through 12. But when I say pipeline, I don't just mean K through 12. I mean K through 12. I mean once kids graduate from school, go to college. I'm talking about once those graduates leave college and start their first roles in whatever company they choose to start in. I'm talking about once that woman or person of color gets to middle management and they hit that glass ceiling that they can't reach above that. I'm talking about this dearth of people of color and women in the C-suite. So when I see the pipeline, it's all of that. I think that there are some serious systemic issues in every single segment of the pipeline. It's as Frida Kapor says, a leaky pipeline. It's not a pipeline that is sufficient. So having companies address issues in every point there and really put systems in place, so be that hiring, be that retention, be those how we evaluate women. We saw that in the case recently down the road a bit. All of that needs to be done. Then they also do need to invest in the pipeline so that we are continuing to build these new young technologists and giving them the opportunity to make it to that point that they can start in the companies.
And that's the interesting thing, because if the world today, obviously we have a million things that need to be improved. But if you look at the trend in most dimensions of the things we care about, the world is better today, even if it's not perfect, than it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. But one of the fascinating things about women in STEM is, especially in computer science, is that the trend has actually gone the other way, where it's actually worse today than it was even 20 years ago, where I think the percentage of women majoring in computer science has actually gone down by half.
Right.
In almost every other field, at least the trend has been in a positive direction. This is a negative. What's the cause of that?
Well, I kind of like rode the wave of that trend because when I graduated at the end of the 80s, there's supposedly, this is what the numbers say, 35% or so women receiving degrees. Now, as a woman graduating at that time, I could tell you it did not seem like 30%. I don't know where the other 35% were. I don't know, because it didn't seem like that. So when I look at those numbers now, I'm like, wow, so it's less than it was then when I went to school. It's got to be really, really bad. I think for me, when I look back on that, what was happening in those years, that was like when the Mac was first a thing, and people were just discovering the internet. And I think the industry overall changed a lot. This whole, what we call programmer culture, I think started to grow and flourish, and I don't think that women felt that that was a place that they wanted to be. For myself, I ended up being in high voltage, like power companies, which is even less of a place a woman would probably want to be. But I was there. But I think in the tech industry in particular, it really became a sort of this male bastion and this ground for really seeding these male-dominated tropes that women didn't see themselves fitting into.
And that's interesting because, when I thought about that same problem, I was like, well, because especially in the 90s and up till now, it seems like it's accelerating. The tech industries has become more kind of,
kind of changing this narrative is flipping the script on that. So when you think of a coder, thinking about students like Kai, Sasha, and Kimora, thinking about that image of a coder as opposed to someone that is ideally white, male, and geeky. Well, that's what it is. What it is.
So one thing that I think would be fun to do before we go to questions is we'd like to do what we call a lightning round.
Well, let me drink a cup.
No stress. We're amongst friends here.
Okay.
So, number one, favorite role model for your daughter? You can.
Okay, so can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely. Yes.
Would this be her role model or my favorite role model?
My interpretation is, who would you want her role model to be?
Mae Jemison.
And explain.
So Mae
Meg
Jemison
is.
was one of the first female astronauts of color. So she's a role model for me. She is a trailblazer. My daughter just met her recently at South by Southwest. And that's the kind of, I think, moxie I want my daughter to have in her career and whatever she does in the future.
Favorite coding language?
I'm going to go with Fortran just because it's
go.
old and I'm
there you
old.
go.
Nobody
Fortran.
knows. Give Fortran.
That's good. That took
Give it up.
Yeah, I like that.
But if not that, I would have to go Ruby. Ruby on Rails.
Ruby, okay.
Yeah.
You're more current there.
Yes, current.
Yes. One piece of advice for the parent of a budding computer scientist.
Trust their interests and where their passion lies. I think often as parents, we try to write the script for our kids as opposed to trusting that where their passion is, they can find success there. Yeah.
And one more. Person, real or fictional, living or dead, that you'd want to have dinner with.
Absolutely, without a doubt, I want to have dinner with MLK.
There you go.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't need any
But if it's living, now that's dead. So you always have to
Living,
do clarifying.
yeah.
Living, I would have to go with Oprah.
Oprah. And please invite me.
I will.
I suspect that you might. And so, just before we move on to Q&A, the one thing that we like to finish up these conversations with is, what's your kind of 60-second idea to change the world?
60-second idea to change the world. If I had a 60-second idea to change the world, I would ask all of the Fortune 20, let's say Fortune 20 companies that exist in the U.S. today, to donate 10% of their net profits every year to teaching kids code. and technology. Off the top.
That's good. That's a good one. That's a good one. Well, no, that would be an inspiring thing. So now we're going to go to audience Q&A, and I'll just remind folks, please ask a question and be brief, and ideally a one-part question and an actual question.
All right.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for coming to speak here
You're
today. It's
welcome.
been fabulous learning about Black Girls Code. And I just wanted to ask about the outreach that Black Girls Code does, because I can see how a program like this can be more accessible to girls whose parents are aware of it or who are probably more economically privileged. So I was wondering if there was anything that the organization was doing to reach out to low-income girls of color.
Yes, so as a focus for the program, we really try to make it cost accessible to anyone that wants to attend the program. So although we don't do anything particularly that's income driven, there are scholarships built into the program. So if a student comes from a household that can't afford to attend, we try to make that accessible. And then we also make sure that the cost of our class overall is well below our market in terms of other programs that are comparable in the program. So most of our time when we do our summer camp, we generally offer that for free for students, maybe a small amount just to fund the program cost itself, but always being conscious that if anyone wants to attend the program, the price should never be a barrier. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Melanie. How are you?
Hi, Melanie.
So, in recent light of the diversity stats that was released by the tech companies here and the economic pressure to perform, how will Black Girls Code evolve to train young girls for leadership roles in these tech companies?
So let me restate your question. So come back and don't leave. I got to ask a clarifying.
Got me queuing us up.
So is your question, how are we responding to train them? Well, so for our program, and as I mentioned before, it is really focused on the technology, but it also has a lot of leadership development and entrepreneurship development built into what we do. So we're not necessarily just teaching them to pass the AP Science APCS test, although we are doing that. We're really teaching them how to become leaders and how to form their own companies. So that is kind of how we're kind of creating this next level technologist that's not necessarily only going to work at Google. Our goal is really to create a student that can create the next Google. Yeah.
Hi, Kimberly. I'm
Hi.
Tanya.
Hi, Tanya.
I want to thank you for your courage and willingness to be so innovative and have such an amazing impact on our young girls. My question is, since you've had the opportunity to see girls all around the country and work with them, what are the gaps in programs and services that you're seeing that's really missing from our educational system, whether it's in the schools or the supporting nonprofits?
Yes, well, a couple things. I think that one of the things that we found that's lacking, without a doubt, is a focus on providing resources to the parents. So generally when we're working in low resource, low income communities, no one is talking to the parents. So I often get this question like, well, how do you encourage the parents? I was like, we don't really have a problem, showing parents that this is a valuable skill set that their students need to learn. But what we found that was missing is no one was talking to the parents. No one was saying, well, this is the path if your student is interested in technology. These are the career opportunities that are available to them. And this is how you can guide and mentor them along that path. Because once a student leaves school, they're back in the home. So one of the things that we are trying to fill in the gap with our program is making sure we develop this relationship with parents, that we're not only doing workshops for the students, but doing parents workshops as well, and training them on what we're doing with the kids so they can go back and support that when they leave our class. So I think in this area for students of color, no one sees a need. It's almost like they don't think our kids have parents at home that care about them, but they do. And they get them up early on Saturday mornings so that they can start a better life for themselves. And it's often, I know I'm being long-winded, but it really is the parents that keeps me going, because I will often get emails from a mother who says, I dropped out of school and, I'm on welfare, but how can you help me, because I want to create a better life for my daughter. I want her to have opportunities that I didn't have. And then we have parents, on the other hand, that may be working and may be in fulfilling careers, but also see a dearth of women that look like them in the tech field. So being able to provide support for those parents on all of the economic spectrum is what's missing now in the education space, and I think what nonprofits can focus on. Yeah.
My name's Annadella Healy, and I was wondering how you could do to improve Black Girls Code. Like, what would you do?
I would have Black Girls Code all across the U.S. in every U.S. I don't know, because every U.S. city. Our goal is to reach 1 million girls, by the year 2040. So really seeing our program expand is what I would like to see, and that's what I would focus on.
And possibly Canada, because
And Canada, of definitely Canada.
Hi, thank you so much for having us all here. I feel like today is pure serendipity, because I, too, was an engineering student in an engineering school, less than 1% that looked like me.
if you could come a little closer to the microphone.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. And my 9-year-old has recently learned and gotten excited about coding on Khan Academy.
Pamela, who does our coding videos, is in the audience, so it might be.
In addition, I have a World of Warcrafter, which I cannot get off the computer.
Yes, I feel you.
And in my case, it's a boy, and I have boys, and I was lucky enough to have boys and want to know how I can do for my boys what you've done for your daughter.
Yes.
And what would be the best starting place?
Well, I think that we're lucky because there are so many coding resources around today that 3 years ago there were not. So when I was talking about these organizations that were focused on teaching women to code, I think Sal stole Pamela from Girl Develop It, because that was where I was going beforehand. And he's lucky because she's a fantastic coder. You should really talk to her though. And they now have so many rich resources on Khan Academy, but there's others. So there's code.org that has a rich resource of curriculum online. There is the girls started coding on, what did you guys start coding on? Scratch, App Inventor, and things like that. So definitely talk to them about the things that they started on, because there's just lots of resources out there now that are online. And there are also other organizations similar to BGC that focus on boys. Hey.
Hi, thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you.
My name I have a mental illness, and I know many, many women, and young women and older women with mental illness. And so you mentioned the financial disadvantages. Have you come across girls with perhaps disabilities as a disadvantage, and how have you addressed that? Thank you.
Yes, we have. So we often, we don't do any particular screening for that, because our classes are open to anyone who wants to register their child. But we often do recognize in our classroom students that obviously have some type of learning disability in the room. But we do not focus on that as a disadvantage for them, because we believe that coding is a great equalizer, because often the kids that are often thought of as disruptive in the classroom are some of the best coders, because they focus right in and they get really engaged in that material. So one of the things that I think that is great about the opportunity to introduce coding to a wider variety of students is because of that, because it allows them to utilize the skill sets that they have that get ignored in the regular classroom. Yep.
Hi, my name is Aaron. Great talk. Love what you're doing. I wanted to say that you're doing a wonderful thing with Black Girls Code, where women and women of color specifically can come together, have a safe space in order to learn, talk, ask questions without feeling like they don't want to, be the one in the class raising their hand. They're not worried participating, and that's great, but then how do you prepare them to sort of move on to environments like a professional workspace or a classroom where suddenly they're dropped right back into maybe being a minority, maybe being expected to act or dress within certain confines, and just sort of that reality check that they'll have to prepare for?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you a story. I'll try to make it quick because I know we ran out of time. I think it was in 2013, the beginning of 2013, we had an opportunity with one of our corporate partners to take a group of students with mentors from their company to the TechCrunch Disrupt Hackathon. I was very concerned about that experience for them because I knew it would be this hot mess of testosterone, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know about this. But we took the girls, and as I imagined, it was this hot mess of testosterone, and I had these flashbacks of like freshman year of college with like pizza boxes all over the place. But interestingly enough, the girls loved it, and I was like, oh, okay. And they really were able to adjust to the environment and still be able to hold their own. And they stayed all night, coded all night, presented at the next day of the presentation. And a similar experience I had with my own daughter, Kai, who I mentioned was, started the program. She's been coding since, 3 or 4 years now. And just last weekend or so, I was dropping her off. She still codes, and she's in her high school robotics class. And she had a practice on the weekend, and I had to drop her off at one of the captain's house. So we're driving to the house. I'm in the Oakland Hills. Didn't ask any questions like moms do. We just go where the kids tell us to go. And I pull up to the driveway for her to get out. Now, I've seen this team before, and I know that they only have like 2 girls. So I wasn't really thinking about that. But when she got ready to get out the car, I noticed that it's like 4 boys and Kai. And I was like, Kai, do you feel comfortable? I mean, is everything okay? And she was like, of course, Mom. What are you talking about? They're nice. Do you think so? She's like, no, they're nice people. And as soon as she got out, they was like, hi, Kai. And they just went back to working on their robot. And I still waited a good 5 minutes just to be on the safe side. But I think the point of that story is that I do really, really believe that this generation, Generation Z, I believe they are changing. And I see differences in attitudes on both from boys, as well as girls in terms of what does gender mean, what does race mean. So I see so much potential in this generation. And I also believe that what we're doing in Black Girls Code creates a level of self-confidence so that when they are going into those environments, and I tell them all the time, hey, it is not going to be changed. We're not going to change the environment probably by the time you get to the workplace. But my goal is to make sure that the girls that are coming through our program have enough self-confidence, they have enough self-assurance. They will absolutely, if it's the last thing I do, have the same level of skill sets that any of the boys that they're going to be in their freshman year at CS. And I think having that level playing field allows them to navigate all of the other biases in a way that they wouldn't without a program like BGC.
Hi, thank you so much for everything you do for our kids. I'm wondering what you would say in general, what is it that women of color can bring to the technology sector that is going to elevate it, change it for the better in ways that it wouldn't have been had women of color not been able to penetrate it?
That's a great question. So I always say that, for me, I don't want to say the name of the CEO who said that she wasn't a feminist, but I make no qualms about it. I am a feminist, I am a womanist. And I think that, not just women of color, but I believe that all women bring a different level of sensibility to any field that we tap into. We tend to be more collaborative. We tend to be more creative in ways that often our male counterparts are not. And I think those are things that are going to help the industry to really transform itself and be more impactful. I think that technology as a tool is like immense, what we could possibly do with technology. But we have not yet, I believe, really tapped into its potential. I mean, we have good dating apps, we have good find a restaurant apps, but are we really solving the hard problems of the world using technology as a tool? No. And I think that is because, without a doubt, because women are not at the table. And when we bring women to the table, I think then we open up technology to its full potential of really being a social change lever.
Well, I think we could chat here all night, but I know I'm
told
speaking
you I
for
could talk.
yeah, no. I think I'm speaking for myself, but I think for all of us here, this was a really inspiring conversation.
Yes.
We look forward to seeing where you go with Black Girls Code. Very exciting.
Thank you, Sal.
Thank you.